Hey everybody, welcome to the Faith Church Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Williams, and joining me today, as per usual, Jeff Clossy.
Hey Jay, good morning, man.
I was trying to throw you off there a little bit.
Yeah, that did actually.
You started to say, hey, and then I was still talking.
Yeah, that was good. Well, this is unscripted.
Yeah.
Per usual as well.
It's unscripted. That doesn't mean it's not. What do you call it when you always say the same thing, but it's not scripted?
Habit?
Okay. It's habitual?
Yeah.
You know, it's not habitual. We're recording this on a different day. This is not our normal recording day, so who knows what's going to happen? I
know. I was thinking that this is going to be either totally normal or very different. How's that for options?
Yeah, I think you pretty much covered it. Or a little different.
Okay. Could be a little different.
Probably one of those three.
It'd be a lot less background noise.
Should be.
Uh-huh.
I mean, if there's background noise today, then something ain't right. Because, yeah, we're recording this on Monday morning, and when we are both fresh, bright-eyed, and bushy-tailed, it's a, dreary morning. I woke up this morning, and it's first time in a long time I did not want to get out of bed.
Yeah, it's definitely that time of year when you can just feel the darkness encroaching, like as far as the day, and then when you add fog to it, yeah, it's exciting. It was exciting driving home last night after the program.
Yeah. Which is the Christmas program. If people missed that was amazing.
It was amazing.
And
funny.
It was very fun.
I was entertained.
Yeah, the kids did a great job as always. The directors did a great job as always. The set builders this year really went above and beyond. It was like the best set ever. I mean, no disrespect to any set builders in the past. It's just you only have so much to work with or whatever. I don't know why. I don't know what hit them this year, but
yeah, it was awesome.
It was so good.
It was, and then it was fun getting to hang out afterwards too. I love that. I had, when you're going through the line where all these suites are, and I'm, restraining myself right at that point.
Yeah.
And just pick the thing you really want. And I saw this piece of fudge, and I'm so thankful that I went for that. It tasted different than I was imagining. Did you have that?
I did not have a single sweet. I never got over there.
Wow, you think you're better than me now?
Well, not because of that. I mean,
I just have to say, I have to finish that thought though for myself.
Sorry. Well, you asked the question.
Yeah, I know. I thought you would have had something. I can't believe this.
You can't get upset with me, telling me I interrupted you when you asked me a question.
Okay, Jay.
Can I finish my thought now?
Okay, go ahead.
No, that's for you.
Oh, that's for me. Yeah. Well, it's this, fudge, and I'm expecting chocolate. Well, it was, and peanut butter, which for me, that's the combo of combos, right? And for many people. And so I was very excited about that. So thank you to whoever made that. I was happy with my choice.
My wife hates peanut butter and chocolate as a combo.
I know others like that too.
She says it tastes like burnt, just burnt.
Nope.
I agree. I agree with you.
But I'm all for that though, because that means more for me.
Yeah. So, yeah, Lauren and I we typically do not gravitate towards the same desserts. And the bummer, I mean, it's really ultimately it's good news because it does mean more for each one of us. But the problem means when, never do we. It's very rare that we share a dessert, in a restaurant or something, which means we never order dessert because neither one of us wants. It's not worth it. It's always one of those things where you're like, hey, would you want to split this, whatever? And it's nope.
Doesn't sound good.
Nope. So sometimes
peanut buttery.
I take one for the team. Yeah, 2 peanut butter. All right. Well, speaking of taking one for the team, I preached yesterday.
Advent 3.
It
was Pink Sunday, Pink's Candle Sunday, if you're doing that at home.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah. We should introduce that next year.
Oh, we could. The Advent wreath is what we're talking about. So 4 candles. And there's a lot of different traditions with that, but the one that we have at home has 3 purple candles and 1 pink candle. And our tradition is that we light the pink one on the 3rd Sunday. So you're kind of getting closer and closer to the.
I thought the pink one is supposed to be the last one. Or not the last one. The last one's white, but
ours, yeah, that's what I mean. There's lots of different ones, but ours is 3 purple and 1 pink. And we do the pink one on the 3rd Sunday.
But Christmas one is white, isn't it?
In the mid, yeah, that's ours is in the middle of it.
Yeah.
But it's not really, ours isn't really part of our wreath. We just put one in the middle.
I thought pink was for the last Sunday of Advent.
Well, maybe for you guys it is.
Wait, you're just saying truth is relative? Is that what you're saying?
Definitely with Advent wreaths, it is.
Okay.
Especially because, Advent wreaths, just as a little aside, are pretty new. They're not like an ancient tradition. They're relatively new.
I mean, they were around when I was a kid.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Thank you. I love it when you agree with me, Jay. This is going to be such a great day.
I don't think I'm agreeing with you.
So, Advent 3 for us was Come Thou Wisdom. Correct?
I think so. I'm looking up the Advent candles. I don't have time for.
Oh boy, I've got him on a. Here, let's go. Are you using AI to help you? Because that would speed this up.
I should.
Our live fact checking for our.
We need an assistant. This is why we need to have a third person.
When we nod, you Google it.
3 candles are purple and lit on the first, second, and fourth Sundays. The 4th candle is pink and lit on the 3rd Sunday of Advent. So I was right.
I was gonna say I was wrong. There we go.
There's no evidence of which one of us said it. It doesn't matter which one of us said what, Jeff.
It doesn't. And don't feel bad, Jay, that you didn't do the right one.
It doesn't. Those only petty people think about who was right and who was wrong.
Well, in the apostolic tradition, they didn't do any of it, so it doesn't matter.
Good point.
But it can be helpful. It is helpful for our family. It was. We lit them actually at lunch after church and then talked through the sermon together and the idea of Christ, the wisdom, and what that means. And yeah, it was a great conversation. So, I mean, for our family, that's what we don't believe that candles are magic or anything, but they are helpful to frame the season to remind us this is what we're in right now.
Good thing you gave that disclaimer.
Yeah, well, I don't want to mislead anyone. We must not have lit the right candle.
Jeff and his magic candle. Magic candles. 3 purple, 1 pink. Get it on the right weekend, or else it doesn't matter. It doesn't count.
And you need to have them lit for at least 2 minutes for it to count.
You have to sing the song, too.
Oh, my.
If you don't sing the song.
What song?
You know the song.
No.
Oh, my goodness. We have to have some listeners who know the song. I'm not going to sing it, but it's Light the Advent Candle 1, Now the Journey Has Begun. Dun, dun, dun.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know that song.
And then each week has a different verse.
Well, see, I wasn't doing it right.
And then it's Candle, Candle Burning Bright.
Long I have heard it. Yes, I have heard this.
I don't know. Whatever.
That sounds really old, like before we were born.
Yeah, that'd be my guess. That's way old. All right, can we talk about the sermon?
Well, I tried to do that, and you didn't seem to want to go there.
We are 24 minutes into this podcast.
No, we are not.
You can't see the clock. You don't know. It feels like it. It feels like we're 24 minutes into this. So, I got a comment about the sermon, and I don't know if it was.
Was it about your qualifications to be a pastor here?
No, that was not in the sermon. If you did not watch live or were not here live, then you did not get to see that fun interaction of my qualifications being called into account. I was going to throw you under the bus and say, don't talk about Jeff that way. But, no, the what were we talking about? Oh yeah, the sermon.
Mm-hmm. You had
somebody made a comment. They made a comment that I didn't know whether to take it. I didn't know how to take it. Let me try it out on you, and you tell me how to take it. That was an interesting angle to come at wisdom from. Like, I think they were thinking I was going to talk more about wisdom, like the idea of like knowledge and wisdom rather than wisdom of God being Jesus. So I didn't know whether that was that was really helpful or, that was an interesting choice. Kind of like when you order the fish. Like,
Dude, I love Monday morning.
At the bar.
We need to do this every Monday morning.
Yeah.
I think that what that person was saying was that was a pleasant surprise. I was expecting just the same old sermon about wisdom.
Oh, okay, great. Well, it wasn't, I don't think. But what did you think? Let me ask you this, since you're doing such a great job of steering this conversation. Let me ask you a question. well, okay. So first of all,
I can't even look at you right now. I can't because
Okay.
you just make me laugh.
well, this,
I'm gonna look away. Just
No,
know
no,
I can hear you even when I'm not looking at you.
okay. I already knew you could hear me without looking at me. I didn't need that clarification. Seriously, we're never recording on Mondays again, ever. I mentioned, I mean, obviously the song is about God with us, so Jesus, the incarnation. So the wisdom it's talking about is obviously, related to that, the incarnation. But I also was trying to make the point of how we have this tension in Advent of either focusing all on the birth and kind of it almost goes towards a sentimentality, or we go into the other ditch and we just skip the meaning of the birth and the life and of Jesus, and we just immediately like, well, yeah, but the reason he came is for the cross, and so we just jump right to it. Is that something that did you resonate with that? Do you feel that tension?
Oh yeah, I definitely do, and I think that's what our the creeds do that, right?
Yeah.
The virgin birth is talked about, right? But then you skip over basically what the Gospels are until you get to the crucifixion narrative part of the Gospels. So yeah, I do think that's a tension. I think especially, I mentioned 2 weeks ago how when we hear about the cross, we think about him paying the price, and thank God he is paying our debt there. And I think in our stream, if you want to call it that, the stream we find ourselves in the church, that's a strength. We really do highlight that, and I think people understand that. The other side of that, though, like the weakness could be, like you said, that you start to lose sight of why is it important that Jesus, the man, lived on earth and actually did life under God. And that's really important. And I know I had to, growing up in this stream, that was definitely a deficiency in my own thinking about him and even how I read the Gospels. I mean, you can read the Gospels very differently. You can read them as, if you skip to the death, if that's kind of your tendency, you will read the Gospels and his teachings primarily as trying to motivate you to repent of your sins and receive forgiveness. That's kind of what you hear. So like the Sermon on the Mount, the standard is so high that you read that and you don't think about how could I actually start to live this out and become the kind of person who lives these things out. It's, yeah, you're right. I am a sinner. Thanks for pointing that out. And part of it is, yeah, we are to see that and repent. But if that's the only thing you're seeing, you're missing. I think he actually did intend for us to begin to live those out. Yes, imperfectly, but our intention is to follow him in the ways that he set before us. So his life is really important. Yeah, that point did resonate with me. In your experience, is that dynamic I just described, even of how you handle the Gospels, has that been something you've seen?
100%. I mean, I think for a while, I grew up in a tradition that probably focused more on the life of Jesus, and then I went right into a tradition that focused on the death. And I think, yeah, that's just what you said there. I don't know that I've articulated in that way. I find that really, really true, that much of my understanding of the Gospels, especially in that second wave of, when I was in seminary and everything, was, Jesus is setting this bar just to show us how short we fall and how much we desperately need forgiveness. And there is truth in that. But that's why we, use the phrase a lot. I use the phrase a lot here that that bar is it's not a bar that we are meant to clear. It's a promise being fulfilled. That idea, that's what has shifted in my life, that Jesus is not just saying, well, this is what perfection looks like, and so next to it, you realize that you are terrible, and so you need forgiveness. It's also, which that's not his demeanor anyway, so it's weird to say also, but that's not the only purpose. The other purpose is saying, this is what it means to be human. Mm-hmm. This is what humanity looks like when it is not perverted by sin. And so when we think of Christ's victory over sin, which we've talked about, that it's not just forgiveness. And I talked to the youth about that on Wednesday night. We talked about why is it important that Jesus was fully God. So Tiffany talked the week before about why it's important that Jesus was fully man. But I talked about why it's important that Jesus is fully God, and that it's not just forgiveness on the cross. Because if it was just forgiveness, we would still be in a whole heap of trouble. Because what good does it do if I have no job? Imagine I have no job and I am in huge debt. And then somebody comes along and pays my mortgage and, forgives all of my debt that I have incurred. But the next day, I'm just incurring more debt. I'm right back in the same boat because I have no way of paying for anything. I have no way of contributing anything. And so just forgiveness, if all God did was forgive me of my sin, I would still be up a creek because the next day I'm going to sin. And I asked the youth that. I said, why is forgiveness not enough? And it was interesting because they quickly said, because I'm just going to sin again. I'm like, yeah. So it's important to talk about the victory that Jesus has over sin is not just that he pays the price and pays the debt, but that he transforms us into who we were created to be originally. And so in his life, he doesn't just show us perfection so that we see that we don't measure up. He shows us we think of it like perfection, even the way we talk about it, as if it's like some like, well, yeah, obviously nobody's that, as opposed to saying, well, yeah, nobody's truly human then. Like you've talked about this a lot, that sin dehumanizes us, makes us less than human. But to be truly human is who Jesus is. We see that in the life of Jesus. And it's magnificent because it's not like there are things that we sometimes think of as sin that we see Jesus do, which means it's not sin. So it's not sin to tell God, I don't like this path that I'm on. It's not sin to ask God, can we do something else? It's not sin to be discouraged or to grieve or to, any of these other things that we see Jesus. It's not sin to be disappointed. It's what we do with those things. It's not sin. It's not inherently sinful to be angry. It's the heart issues behind it. Why are you angry? Why are you grieving? What are you doing with that grief? What are you doing with your doubt or with your desire, your lack of desire to be on the road you're in? Like, what do you do with all of that? That we see all of that in the life of Jesus. And so, yes, the short answer to your question is I often saw it as just the shortcut to, and that's why we need the cross as a way of forgiving me for falling short, but not that's why we need the cross, because through the cross, sin is defeated, and I actually get to be a person who lives, more and more each day into the image of Christ, which means that I get to be more and more human until one day I will be human as God intended me to be human completely, because sin will be no more.
Yeah, it's amazing to think of, Jesus, come thou wisdom from on high. And you just highlighted, I think, a really key way that he reveals what we don't understand. That is like related to true humanity. Who are we? What are we made to be? And the answer is that we're made to be the image of God, which I think it is the other side of what he was doing. And you mentioned that in your two talks. One was, fully God, fully man. So he reveals true humanity, the fullness of it, the beauty of it, and the design of humanity. And in doing so, he then is the authoritative revelation of who God is, because he reflects God perfectly, which is just amazing. And I've been really, in my own devotional life recently, resting there and really dwelling there on things that I know about who God is and how he responds to situations that I'm in or that other people are in that I'm trying to help, because I know who Jesus is, and that I would not know about God if I did not know Jesus. And it's just amazing to me, like the chance we have in Advent to meditate on that and to think about that, and why that antiphon, that original, antiphon that made it into our hymn, O come, Emmanuel, why that's so important, because it's all obscured, right? It's distorted our view of both our humanness and then God and his godness. We don't have, it's not instinctual. Maybe that's a better way of putting it. Like it's obscured and fuzzy. And those narratives we have about who we are and who God is, that's what runs life. That's, and it's so ingrained in us. That's why it was so crucial that part of what the Messiah did was to set that right, to give us true knowledge. And that's where you spent, a good part of the sermon was about what is true knowledge? Actually, what do we mean by that? And I thought that was a really important point.
That's why I said it.
That was good.
Because you thought, well, yeah. I think here's what I was thinking in terms of is, we are known for personifying things a lot, like just in the culture, like we name our cars. People do. I don't name my car, but like it's not an uncommon thing to name your car or to think about things as having feelings or whatever. But then what's interesting to me is that as Christians, we depersonify wisdom. So wisdom is personified in Jesus, right? And God and who he is. It's not a quality or a trait that he has. He just is that. And so when I say we depersonify it, I mean that we take the teachings of Jesus and the principles that we find in Scripture and we remove them from the person of Jesus. And now they become just this idea. So avoid debt, be truthful, work hard, serve people, all these different things, even loving people, but we depersonify all of those things. And when we do that, I think we don't always realize we're doing is that what we actually end up doing is putting ourselves as the personification of those things. Like what makes sense to me. And that's what I was trying to push back against. And I didn't articulate it in that way. So maybe this is helpful if people didn't catch really what I was trying to go after, is the idea that what actual wisdom is not always going to seem wise to me because I am tainted by sin and I have my own, my heart is rebellious. It is deceitful. And I just think it's so common in our culture to not question our own assumptions of like our understanding of a situation or our understanding of what is the right thing to do or what is wise in a situation. We all, it's the fool is wise in his own eyes. Like, it's just this idea that like, I'm really confident about this stance. And so we actually, like, we're not running it through the lens of Jesus. And that's what I was trying to get at too, of reading Scripture and understanding the Proverbs. What does it look like to understand the book of Proverbs through the lens of Jesus? That whatever we see, the wisdom that's being given, which is wisdom and not law. So there's a difference between commands and wisdom. I didn't get to go into that of, wisdom the wisdom literatures. These are general ways of life. They're not laws. They're not commands, but it's helpful in understanding the way the world works. But it's all personified in Jesus. And I think we would do well to put that on him rather than like running it through the filter. So when Scripture or when Proverbs talk about how, like, what does it look like to deal with fools, or what does it look like to deal with like handling, receiving harsh words or the words that we speak, like putting it onto Jesus is the way then to understand, well, what does this really mean? Like, does it mean that I should never say something that sounds harsh to somebody? Well, okay, but putting that on Jesus does sometimes say things that are harsh, or are hard to hear. Certainly he says things that are hard to hear. Is, flattery, like, am I supposed to avoid flattery? So then that I never encourage people? Like, well, Jesus builds people up. Like, so there's a differentiation there. And then he manifests that. So using him, like, so that all goes back to the idea of personifying, which I didn't say in the message, but maybe that's helpful. Of we depersonify wisdom, and make it about principles and ideas, but that really ends up reflecting our own personhood. And so we need to re-personify it, but in the right person, which is Jesus.
Yeah, and I just a couple minutes ago, you said something that really resonated too, that I wanted to go back to and underscore. I agree with that, what you just said. And it's this idea, I think Tim Keller said something like how it's healthy to doubt your own doubts, whether they be about, I think a lot of times he was saying it in the realm of when a person is questioning God or God's existence, doubt your doubt about him and research it. But I think that also just applies to everyday life. Like you said, the point you were making is sometimes wisdom for us does not feel wise when we first hear it. It feels like really wrong because our mind is caught up in all kinds of things that aren't true. And that's such a bondage that we can really be in, that Jesus came to free us from by his person and by his personhood. But I would just say that to me, one of the marks of people that I look at that are farther along than me following Jesus, they're, I see in them a not a lack of confidence that what they know is true, but a willingness to question their perspective or to be open in a conversation that maybe they don't have all the answers. And it's just interesting how becoming more like Jesus seems to be this willingness to admit, like, yeah, I might have forgot that. Maybe I totally miscommunicated that. Help me understand. Like, I guess it's just a humility that I don't have the viewpoint of God. My limited viewpoint is limited and often very mistaken about what's real. And I think part of the reason that happens when a person follows Jesus, they grow in that, is because he teaches them over and over again new things that they didn't know before that they thought they knew. I mean, that's part of the experience of being his disciple is, I am the student, you are the master, Jesus. Teach me. Help me to become like you. Help me to grow in your knowledge and your wisdom. And the more he answers that prayer, the more then we realize, I did not know that before. I was mistaken about that before. And I think that we can apply that, literally to everything in our life, right? Like, to just at the everyday conversation at the grocery store where I thought I understood where this was and I didn't. And really it goes all the way down to the mundane things, not just the things that we would call like, these are, great theological truths. Yeah, it's those things, but I think it's just how we function as well.
Yeah, I think being slow to respond it's like James knew what he was talking about, to be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. I think also slow to form conclusions about things, and just like, I want to gain understanding. It's interesting how often Jesus is often very slow to respond to situations. In the Gospels, he just lets things unfold, and he lacks no wisdom. Like, he is the wisdom of God. And so you see the manifestation of true wisdom, and it is always slow to respond. It is seeking understanding. He asks so many questions because it's wise to ask questions. It's wise to let a person share why. Now you could make the argument that Jesus is not gaining new information, but I think you can also make the argument that in the humanity of Jesus, that he is asking questions. But he's also asking questions. It would certainly be true to say that he's asking questions because that's a better way for a person to understand. Like them processing, rather than him just going around giving information. And that kind of goes, to what I was trying to talk about, that knowledge is not just about information, which we can get to that in a second. But what you're describing as far as just not being wise in our own eyes and being willing to kind of question ourselves. Robbie always used to point out the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is the idea that essentially the more experienced you become in something, the less confident you are of how much you know. And so, originally it was done with people who saw themselves as an expert, and like how they would rank or rate on a scale of 0 to 100, how they would rate their own competence measured against their actual competence. So they would do objectively scored tests where it's like, it's very, it's it's very objective whether this was good or not good. And it's fascinating that people with little competence had high confidence in their competence. And the more competent they became in a particular task, the less confident they were. And so it's the idea that, yeah, I mean, it's amazing to me. We see this, the seminary that I teach at, we've got a couple of professors who are like just brilliant scholars. They're so slow to give responses to things. Like if you want to know it, I always try to be really careful about this, but anytime you hear a pastor be really flippant about a Greek word, understand that high level Greek scholars are not that flippant about it. They are typically way more like, yeah, it could be this, it could be this. Sometimes comically so, where it's like, yeah, but it means this 28 times. 28 out of the 29 times it means this thing. And they're like, yeah, but you never know. It's just, and it's not because they doubt it or whatever, but it's just the more experienced you become in something, the less confident you are. And I think that we just need to be mindful of that. And it's because, I mean, I remember a brand new believer back in Colorado, and he said to me, he's like, oh, I don't know why people are so confused about the Trinity. That's so obvious how that works. And then he started to tell me something that has been like people used to get burned at the stake for saying. So I informed him that it is good that he did not live in very early church times. He would have been in big trouble. But it's true that when it's brand new, it's like things seem so simple, so obvious. It's why kids are very confident. Teenagers are very confident that they understand how the world works. But an 80-year-old is like, yeah, they've seen some things, which then goes to the whole knowledge, information, and experience thing. But
well, yeah, and that's one of the things I wrote down was just that, and sometimes when I should put quotes around it when I think I'm quoting you, Jay, but because I don't want to ever misquote you, but intentionally anyways. But experiential knowledge is our need. I wrote with an exclamation point. So I don't know if you said that, but
I did not.
I was getting that from what you were saying and just really resonating with it, especially with what you were saying a little while ago about wisdom being personified, in Jesus being the expression and where wisdom comes from. And I think that that's why, again, going back to the word discipleship, why it is an active following of a real living person and not just a curriculum that we study and then we take tests about. It's very different than that. So it's actually walking with him and then learning from him and becoming like him that way. And yeah, we end up learning facts that we could write on a test, but it's much more than that. It's much deeper. And I think that that's, for me as a follower of Jesus, I need to be reminded of that because it actually energizes my following of him. And that makes sense, but it motivates me in my desire to grow more and more as his disciple, because I know what I need today is to walk with a person through whatever happens. I don't know what the whole day will hold for me, but I know for sure that every moment of the day, I want to be walking with him through it, no matter what comes. And yeah, that's very motivating. And it's amazing to me that because God took on flesh, that's possible. We can sometimes, I think we assume it, which is great in the church. We assume that we can do that, but it's an amazing reality that he's made available to us, that we can actually learn from God in the flesh and that he's still with us. It's just amazing.
It is. And that's what our focus should be. And that's, I was trying to drive at that idea that we fixate so much on what's right or wrong when we have right and purity personified, and then we get to walk with him. I could have used this illustration, but I just was thinking about it right now of when I've gone biking with you, the 2 times you've invited me to go biking.
Here we go.
But like that one time where I'm the least experienced biker in the group that went mountain biking that one time you asked me. And I remember being like at the back of the pack or second to last in the pack, like wherever and I'm going slower than everybody else. And But I also have no concept for the trail or which way we're supposed to be going. And I just think like, imagine if I just got really fixated on, well, but how do I, like, what happens if we come to a fork in the road? And what happens if we, like, how do I know if I can cross that little water crossing? Or how do I know if this part of the trail is too overgrown? How do I know if but what's interesting is in that situation, I'm not going to get fixated on any of that because I'm not capable. Like, I just don't have the experience to be able to make those decisions. What I do know is if I follow you and the other guys, I'm going to be fine. Like, my whole mission was to follow your line, to follow, like, to go a similar speed as best as I could. Like, if you slow down, I'm going to slow down. If you speed up, I'm going to speed up. If you pick a certain line, like, I'm going to pick a certain line. And by doing that, I actually learned how to pick lines. Mm-hmm. If I'm actually paying attention and going, oh, okay, so you're going to pick up speed here because this is an opportunity to pick up speed so that you're not, stuck climbing this big hill on the other side. Or this time you actually just got off and we walked it up because it was too rough to build up that kind of speed. And I started to learn how to do it. And I just think, man, when we do that, when we make our goal in the morning to walk with Jesus and to listen to him as I walk through my day and follow him, I'm going to learn so much more than when my aim is, okay, I need to make sure I do all the right things. And so to do all the right things, I got to make sure I fill up my head with knowledge. So just think about how that affects the way you might read the Bible in the morning. Like, if I'm reading the Bible in the morning to try to, like, get information and then apply that in a particular way, in the day, that's one way. Another way is I'm reading the Bible as, like, priming the pump of abiding in Jesus and hearing his voice and thinking with him and walking with him to go throughout the day to learn whatever he has to teach me that day.
Yeah, that's a very different way of reading. One is like an event that, time with God that is contained to that moment, right, where you have the Bible open. And another way is that time with the Bible open is the catalyst to the rest of the day of being with him. And I do think that's what it's meant to be. Like, the Bible is the vehicle through which we can hear him very clearly because it's his word, and it's authoritative, and then it's so that I then can walk with him the rest of the day. I love that illustration of the trail as well, because in our everyday life, just when we try to think about how would we apply what we just read, that's a fair question, and we should ask that. Jesus said to be doers of his word. What we need to take into account is our inability to know what the trail ahead holds, right? Because when I ride my bike, for example, on the same trail over and over again, I know I have now gotten through the most difficult parts of the trail, so I can ride harder because I don't need anything in reserve. For example, I've already did the hard parts; the climbs are done. But if I don't know what's ahead, how do I apply that knowledge? And Jesus does know. And he knows how to take care of us. And so I love that illustration. We walk with him, who is the master, and we imitate him. And our imitation of him is how we become more and more human, right? And we don't always understand why a thing is the way it is. We don't. Like, why his ways are the way they are. We don't always understand that. And sometimes they feel unnatural to us because what is normal for us is abnormal. But we know if we imitate him and we grow in our hearts, like in our inner being, to become more and more like him, we will be able to do the things he did and live the way he lived. And that really is, what discipleship is, and it's what he has made available for us if we would take that, if we would receive that offer of following him in that way. I mean, it makes me think, Jay, of like Romans 12:2 as well, like, be transformed by the renewal of your mind. And that whole passage there, this all makes me think of it in this moment, at least. And that idea of being transformed, and what needs to happen for us to be transformed is that our mind is being renewed in him. Our patterns of thinking and even assumptions about reality, he helps us to question those and to take on his ways and his ways of thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was thinking about as you're saying that 1 Corinthians 2, when Paul says, "When I came to you, I did not come proclaiming to you the testimony of God with lofty speech or wisdom, for I decided to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. And I was with you in weakness and in fear and in much trembling. And my speech and my message were not in plausible words of wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit and of power, so that your faith might not rest in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. Yet among the mature we do impart wisdom, although it is not a wisdom of this age or of the rulers of this age, who are doomed to pass away. But we impart a secret and hidden wisdom of God, which God decreed before the ages for our glory." And he talks about, then having that we have the mind of Christ. And I think, just that idea that it is a supernatural, wisdom, that what God is imparting to us is the way the world actually is, but our lens is perverted. And so much of faith is trusting, hanging out. It's like it's like we see, like Paul talks about, seeing in a mirror dimly. It's like, if you imagine having very foggy vision, or losing your eyesight and just needing to grab hold of somebody to walk you through someplace that you can't see clearly. And, you might see something fuzzy over here and you might think it's one thing, but it's actually not. But it's trusting the person who can see clearly and hanging on to them. And that is the wisdom, that we are given. And, I think about how infatuated we are with information and with knowledge, especially when we think about ministry and needing to have all the information, all the right answers, whether it's sharing the gospel or counseling or just encouraging a brother or sister or praying. And I always find it interesting that when Jesus sends out the 72, they know so little at that point. They have no idea about the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. They don't understand the forgiveness of sins. They certainly don't understand, atonement in any kind of real way at all. What they know is what Jesus has commanded them to go and do, and then they do what they've already seen him do. So what's amazing about that to me is they heal people. Well, how did they heal people? How did they know how any of that works? They didn't. Jesus told them, go and do this, and they just mimicked him. They did what they saw him doing. And then as they do what they saw him doing, they start to understand more. And then when they have questions, why couldn't we tried to cast that demon out? Why couldn't we do it? He instructs them, not always really clearly, where you're going oh, okay, well, that was the step I missed. It's just fascinating how Jesus really does set up this, he walks along the road with them, and it's as they go, they learn things by experiencing them, not by sitting in class for 8 hours a day and then going and spending 10 minutes applying the thing that they spent 8 hours learning about in theory. And I just don't know. I don't know what it is about us that we resist that. I think part of it is because we like to know and not do.
It's a lot easier.
It's so much easier. It's way easier to be. I mean, the internet is full of experts who have never done anything. I mean, I see that. I like photography a lot, and it is amazing to me. You can always tell when somebody is not an actual photographer by their comments. The more they talk about gear and the more they are really strongly opinionated about gear and about particular brands being way better than something else, whatever, the more this person does not do this for a living. Because people who do it understand way better how these things work, and they're also kind of with the Dunning-Kruger effect, they also have a lot more humility about about it.
Man, I think in my experience of just ministry, a really important application of that point is, when all of us at some point in our life are going to want counsel, we're going to want advice, we're going to want input from others. And I don't know if you've experienced this, Jay, but I have, where often a person will go to multiple people, and often the people that are most eager to give kind of unqualified, unguarded advice are the ones that when I hear it, I'm like, I would question that counsel. And often the wisest counsel is coming from someone who is saying something like, man, I could be wrong about this, but here's what I see. You need to pray about that, though. And to me, that's what it sounds like. And when I have received godly counsel, that often ends up being the route I go, is the humble counsel and the not overconfident, I guess is what I'm saying. So I think that's a really important application for us, is just, we are seeking counsel, or when we're asked to give counsel, to give it through as much humility as we can, and to say, I am not God. He has not told me exactly what you need, but here's what I'm seeing. And be honest about when we doubt our counsel. Say, I could be totally wrong about that. Obviously, there are cases when a person asks a counsel and it's just obvious, yes. But I don't know if you've seen that dynamic of just a person's eagerness to share counsel that is not helpful.
I mean, for sure. And all I have to do is look back at my younger self.
That's what I mean. Like,
yeah, in ministry. I mean, I remember I actually the other day thought back to feedback I gave to a seasoned pastor. He asked for feedback, and I was so embarrassed when I thought back to the feedback I gave to the seasoned pastor, because I was like, oh my goodness, I saw it was so simple to me at the time. And now I realize, it's not that simple. And you're right. Like, that is if you ask for counsel from people and they're really eager to give you very clear, like, what you should do, that's probably, unless, like, if somebody says to me, like, I'm not sure if I should murder my neighbor or not, I think I can be pretty confident and clear, like, no, you should not. You definitely should not do that. But most of our lives are complex situations. They're not black and white situations. And the most important thing always is to abide in Jesus. And I think where people lose their confidence, and when I get pushback from other pastors or whatever, like, yeah, but they misconstrue who Jesus is. Yes, 100%. But that's the problem. You're not going to fix that problem by just shortcutting them to the answer. So like, well, what should I do? Even if I know, like, well, yeah, but even when I know, unless it's an emergency situation, but if it's something that is like, okay, I think you got to figure this out on your own. Well, then what I'm going to want to do is I want them to pray, like, actually confess. What are they thinking? How are they processing it? What are they feeling? Not just a generic prayer, but an honest prayer. Listen to God's voice, both through prayer and through his word. Like, in scripture, listen, don't just read, but listen. And then as you feel his, like, leading through that, then trust him. Most of the time when I'm talking with people, it's amazing to me, especially when I'm talking to believers who have walked with Jesus. They often know, like, the reason why we are, okay, this may be oversimplified, speaking of just being oversimplified, but I'm curious what you think about this. In my experience, when I'm struggling with something, I actually know what is the right thing to do. The struggle is that I don't want to do what is right. Now, sometimes it's a lack of information. Sometimes it's the issue really is I don't understand what's happening here. But most of the time when I'm really struggling with a decision, it's because I'm struggling with my desire to trust, either my faith to trust or my desire to walk in that path. If we only struggled with decisions that were genuinely like, I need more information, I think that would just be I think we wouldn't struggle very often. Isn't that fun? I mean, would you say, I mean,
Oh, I think that's really true. I think it often, I mean, there are probably moments where we just really
Sure.
have no clue, but,
Sure.
and we don't know and we don't know. But I do think, I mean, when I think about decisions, especially turning points in life that I've made or walked with people through, it is almost always, spending a day of prayer, for example, for wisdom. For me, much of that day is growing in confidence that God is with me and that I can trust him through this next step that I know he's calling me to make. I don't know if that makes sense or if I said that,
Yeah.
but that I agree with you. I think that is often the wisdom that we need is that he is sufficient. And when we evaluate, can I do this or should I do this? The way we evaluate ourselves, we've been talking about this in our How People Change class on Wednesday night, needs to be, I am a new person and my potential is not what it used to be. And so the issue isn't like, I'm just too weak to do it. It's, will I trust him that he can provide what I need for what he is obviously calling me into? And I think most of us, when we start asking the question, not what is he saying, but what has he been saying in our life and through people and circumstances and his word, it does become clear. And then will we trust? That's where we need his help so much, is will I trust you that you will be with me in this, that there is actually nothing to fear because you're my shepherd and I'm okay in you all the time. Yeah, I think that's true. But it's easier to feel like actually what I need is more,
Right.
knowledge. That's just,
More information on what the trail looks like and how
I could just research some more.
do I have the right gear for the trail, and do I have that's interesting to think through that, and that God's heart. I mean, just think about what his desire is for us. His desire for us is to grow in our faith and our trust in him. It is not, his desire is not that we would get better at figuring out riddles, or that we would, pass a theological exam. Like, his desire is our faith. Now, that doesn't mean theology isn't important. That doesn't mean, like, it is incredibly important, because otherwise we end up confused. Like, it's only through, like, that is the act of theology, or that's the study of theology that would lead me to say God is good and his desire is that we grow in faith. I don't get that outside of how God has revealed himself through his word and my study and understanding of that and my thinking about God, which is theology. So it is important, but like, it's important to then remember that, okay, this is God's aim, because the more I learn to trust him, the more I understand how faithful he is and trustworthy he is, the more I will follow him. And then that's where I receive abundant life. That's the better thing. And to fall short or to try to do a shortcut to that it never ends well. But if that's his aim, then his aim is not to confuse me. Like, he's not trying to create it's not an escape room. We sometimes think of temptation, that, the Lord will always give us a way of escape. And we think of it like an escape room. If I just crack the code and, figure out exactly how to pray for this or confess the right sin or do this thing over here, and we end up with this mishmash of kind of a karma, like a Christian karma kind of like, weird kind of mishmash that is not Christianity. Jesus, when he's calling his disciples, it's very clear. He doesn't like ever, you never see in the Gospels him disappear and then leave little clues that if they just problem solve enough and figure out enough, they'll end up finding him behind this tree. And he's like, you found me. He doesn't do that. He makes himself very plain and he says, follow me. So it stands to reason most of the time that we struggle with decisions. The reality is, if we are to trust the Gospels, we would have to say that the primary way that Jesus works is actually pretty clear and saying, follow me. And most of the time that we're struggling with it, it's because it doesn't seem wise. It seems, it's either it doesn't seem wise, or it doesn't seem life-giving, or it doesn't seem good, or it doesn't seem joyful. And so it looks like that's a road I don't want to go down. And all of my mental gymnastics is trying to convince myself why this other path is better. And so Jesus could be literally standing there at this door, and I'm like, yeah, but this door looks pretty awesome, so I think you actually would be over here and behind this door. And it's like, well, wherever he is, that's where you should go. And that's what wisdom is learning. Like you said, I like how you kind of summarize that wisdom is learning. I mean, you didn't I didn't put quotes around it, but wisdom is learning to trust God. I mean, that's learning. And then as we walk that road with him, then we start to understand, and then we actually have wisdom. And that's when we can give counsel, because we've walked some of these roads, and you can say, well, I every situation can be different, but I've gained a lot of understanding because I've walked this road with Jesus, and I've seen how he's handled these things. And so I feel like I'm a little more, I have, like I said, more wisdom, more understanding, but then that should also bring with it more humility to understand how complex all these situations are.
Yeah. And I think as we do that, we grow in discernment, right? And I think a large part of what that is discerning what is good from what is not, and what is of Jesus and what is it not. And we can discern, the battle over and over is discerning, like, is my thinking right now just of the flesh, of Satan, of darkness, or is it of him? And our enemy really, his aim is to deceive us, to twist reality, to entice us away from what is true and right and good. And that's his whole aim, is to make what is broken seem life-giving to us. And so that becomes a pattern, right, in us as well, and a habit. So it can become really hard to see that sometimes. But I think as we follow him and we grow in wisdom as we follow him, those paths that lead to really ultimately death and destruction, they don't lead to life, they become more and more obvious in our lives and in other people's lives as well, because we've become attuned to what is good and what is wise and what is true. And at the end, I just had to pull it up because I wasn't able to call it to mind when I was quoting it earlier, but that Romans 12:2, where it says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." The second verse in that sentence in that verse is, "Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will." I think that's like the experience of that, right? Like, then you will know the path that you're on, what his will is, and his will is always what is good. And again, bringing this all back to Advent, God loves us so much that he would actually take on flesh to help us do this, to teach us how to do this, and to wake us up both out of our stupor, but then also to free us from those powers that have deceived us and have really often taken our thoughts captive. And it's just an amazing thing, his love and his initiative, I guess, to make that so, to free us from those patterns of thinking and even perceiving reality that are not real.
Yeah, and I love how you phrase that. And of course, that goes into what our plea is every week, to be connected with others, because we weren't meant to walk that road and just figure it out one-on-one with Jesus. He is with us, and we help each other in that path. And so if you want to get connected, email us at connect@faithpastigo.com or talk to us on a Sunday. Let us help you get connected to others. Walk this road with others so that we can all grow and build each other up and grow in wisdom, because we all have different experiences, which means we all follow Jesus on some of these different paths, which then is so enriching to our understanding of who he is and how deep his love is, because we will never exhaust all the different angles there are to the depth of Christ's love. So we hope this has been helpful. As always, we appreciate you taking the time to listen. Until next time, grace and peace.